Welcome everyone, thanks for joining again. Today we have with us Mrs. Yaffa Palti.
Hi.
Yaffa is a Torah educator and the founder of the Happy Wife Club, a 12-week transformative program that helps reignite the spark between women and their spouses. Yaffa has dedicated her life to inspiring and empowering others. Thanks for stopping by.
It's a pleasure.
So tell me a little bit about yourself. How'd you end up in South Florida?
Okay, so it's a long story that we don't have time for now, so I'll skip to the end. The end is where my husband and I are community builders. So we've lived in a bunch of different places. We lived in Mexico, we lived in San Diego, and we moved to Miami. We go where we see the arrows that God sends us. Wherever the direction that we see He wants us to be, that's where we go. So we saw that He was sending us to Miami. It was the place that we felt we can build a community and we can build a shul, a synagogue, and that's what's been happening. So we moved here about 4 years ago, almost 4 years ago.
Oh.
And we've been building, we've been growing, and it's an incredible place to live. We're very happy here. It was a good move.
That's amazing. And you used to be in Mexico before, I think,
Yeah,
right?
I lived in Mexico for 11 years.
Oh, wow.
Mexico City.
You speak Spanish still? Or?
Now I do.
Oh, wow.
I didn't before.
Maybe we should do this in Spanish.
Maybe
Change
not.
it up this one.
If you want to have real communication, let's stick to English. I can speak Spanish, but it's like, when I speak Spanish, I speak from my head. When I speak English, I speak from my heart.
That's beautiful.
So,
That's good.
So I can do it if I have to, but my preference obviously is English.
Awesome. And you started this program. What's this program about? I know it's specifically for women, I
The
believe.
Happy Wife Club?
Yep.
So yeah, it is specifically for women. However, the first 8 weeks of the course, I actually give them homework that they have to teach what they learned to their husbands and do it with their husbands. And I give them worksheets and I want them to connect because everything I'm teaching the women, the men also have to know. But I'm just more comfortable. And I feel like the women are also more comfortable if it's an intimate group for women, so we don't have the men join us. But I want them to know everything we're talking about. And in fact, you're all hearing it here for the first time. I am considering having my husband teach the same things to the husbands that I'm teaching to the wives. We're going to kind of create like a men's group also, a men's club, Happy Husband
that's
Club.
great.
Because they both have to know. This is connection for both of them. It's not one-sided.
So what do you teach in general in this program?
So my main focus, the first 8 weeks, is emotional intimacy. And this is something that people don't really talk about, people don't really teach about, and people don't really know about because of that. There's a lot of ignorance in what connection means between a couple. And there's a lot of ignorance in what the purpose of marriage is. People don't realize, like, what is the reason? Why do you get married? Why do you have a relationship with somebody? Why are you spending your life with this complete stranger? You grew up two completely different people. You decide to give up a life of comfort to move in with another person, to have conflict and to learn how to live with another human being, which is not an easy thing. It gets easier, but these things are hard and you're making this choice. Why? Why are you doing this, right? Is it just so you can have help paying the rent? You don't have to pay a loan? Or is there something deeper than that? So the idea of creating emotional intimacy, couples I've encountered through all my years of coaching and just experience dealing with different people end up roommates for, many, many, many years of their marriage. And there's nothing more, there's no deeper connection. They can go days without even seeing each other or speaking to each other, and not out of contempt and not because they're ignoring each other. They're just living parallel lives under the same roof.
Yeah.
So, and then people feel so lonely. People are feeling so lonely in their marriages. And that leads to a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, a lot of feeling bad about yourself, a lot of lack of fulfillment in life. And sometimes it ends in, looking for someone new because I'm feeling lonely with this person. But meanwhile, you're going to feel lonely with the next person too if you don't know how to have real emotional intimacy with another person.
You touched on a point of what's the purpose of marriage? Because it used to be that you only became intimate with a person after marriage. But nowadays we live in a culture where many people become intimate with even strangers nowadays, and so we lose the purpose of marriage to a certain extent. I wonder what your thoughts are on that, and what is essentially the purpose of marriage in general. And I've seen these couples, like I've always said, I'm not married, no, I'm single, so I don't have experience in that area as much as you, but I've spoken to people that they are together, they move in together, they live for 7 years together, and after 7 years, when they even talk about marriage, that's when they break up.
And it's over.
So it doesn't make any sense to me. So I've always thought, like, if I date somebody, I'm not gonna date them for 7 years, 8 years, move in together, because I mean, my intuition tells me, I don't have any experience in the matter, but my intuition tells me that if you're not all into a relationship, then the relationship won't be successful.
That's right. And here's the ironic thing. I know so many couples that they're in love and they love each other, and yet their marriages don't last. They end in divorce, or they live in very, very strained marriages. So you say to yourself, but they love each other. Like, why does that happen? Because truthfully, being in love with each other is not enough. You have to be in love with marriage. You have to be 100% committed to your marriage, 100% committed to a partnership with the other person, no matter what. And that's the most important thing in marriage. Whenever I ask my groups of women or my brides, I teach brides also, I say, what's the most important ingredient in a healthy marriage? And always I get loyalty, honesty, love, all of the things, communication, they're all true. They're all needed in a relationship. But there's one thing that comes before all of those, and that is commitment. So
commitment is a prerequisite for marriage. So it's not the other way around. It's not that you talk to somebody and then you become in love, and then after you become in love, you decided to commit. No, it's the other way around. You have to decide to commit first, and after you decide to commit first, that's when you have to look for a spouse.
Or it could happen while you're looking for the spouse, but it's all mind work. It's all this mindset of, I am looking for someone that I am going to spend the rest of my life with. This is a commitment. Because if you are not committed to your marriage, then you're always going to be looking for a way out. No matter what happens, you're going to look for a way out. If you're committed to your marriage, no matter what happens, you're going to look for a way in.
That's amazing. Yeah, incredible. I'm a huge fan of Tony Robbins. I told you this before we started, and I went to one of his seminars, and he has a day called Relationship Day.
Okay.
And in that Relationship Day, he divides the room in men and women, and he talks about that there are certain things that are women and men are different. I mean, that's my opinion. I would love to get your thoughts on that. But what he speaks particularly in this course, he divides the room and he talks about 3 things that are important for a masculine man and 3 things that are important for a feminine woman. So I'll just touch upon one of them to get your thoughts on that. But he divides the room and he asks first the men, raise your hand whoever felt unsafe for their lives or felt fear for their lives, actually, that somebody was going to harm them. You were walking down an alley and you felt somebody was going to harm you, or some kind of fear for your life in the past week. Out of the entire room of men, like maybe 1% of the room raised their hands. He has the exact same question to women, and all of them raised their hands. 98% of women raised their hands. So it seems like women look for safety in general in relationships, and not only in physical safety, but in general safety that a man may provide. Safety, financial safety, security, emotional security, etc. So what do you think about that? Do you think there's a difference there? And I want to extend this conversation to a more broader topic, which is, what is the difference and what are the roles of the masculine figure and the feminine figure in a marriage?
Okay. Well, to answer the first question, there's absolutely a difference.
Yeah.
And we see that straight from the Torah, which is my source of knowledge and information and truth. And, because I believe that it is the absolute truth. And just the fact, go back to the very beginning when the first person was created, right? Adam in Hebrew, translated to Adam. So Adam was person. That's what Adam actually means. It means person, right? When the first human being was created, it was actually created an androgynous being, which was male and female together. And then they were separated into 2, and then they were told, as soon as they were separated, now you have to get married and reunite as one. Which is very interesting if you think about it, right? They were already one. Why did they have to be separated and united again, right? Because they were one being, but they weren't able to create any sort of unity between themselves because they were already one being. They needed to be separated, and they needed to choose each other. And they needed to connect with each other in a way that they didn't, as that androgynous being, he still felt very lonely. There was no one to actually talk to because it was one of the same person, right? So they needed that connection. Now, when you think about what is the attraction between male and female, right? So if you ask Freud, according to what I've heard and learned about Freud, what does he say it is? What's the attraction between male and female? Do you know what he says?
What does he say?
He says it's sexuality.
Ah, yeah, of course.
Right?
Yeah.
He says it's the libido, it's sexuality, right? According to Torah, it's not. Judaism believes that it is not about that at all. That sexuality is actually kind of genderless, okay? It has nothing to do with that. According to the Torah, it's not a need for pleasure, and it's not a need for sexuality. It's a need for wholeness, a need for connection, a need for completion. And male and female were each created differently with their own strengths and their own weaknesses so that they could combine together and create a oneness between them. What's the definition of unity?
I would say wholeness, coming together.
Okay, you're right. Even more specifically, unity by definition is the unification of two opposing forces or two opposing energies. That come together as one. Because if you and I were the exact same person, there is no unity. We're already united because we already have everything that's the same, right?
Yeah.
To create an act of unity means we have to be different. By nature, we have to be different. And this is why in Judaism, the one being that is defined as a unit, as one unity, by the word echad, is referring to God. Right? We say Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad when we say the declaration of Shema Yisrael. Right? What we're calling Hashem Echad. Why is he Echad? Because God is the ultimate unification of opposing forces. He is compassion. He is, in Hebrew, the Hebrew terms are din. He's gevura. He's chesed. He is strength, compassion. And not only that, we have a whole, if you're getting into the Kabbalah, the mystical portion of the Torah and of Judaism, he's all the sfirot, which are all the different levels and layers in this. He's everything together, a unification of all different forces and all different energies. That's why he is called Echad. So unity between two people has to be a unity between people that are different. It's very easy to love someone who's just like you because they're an extension of you. The challenge is to love someone who's different than you are. So
when people say opposites attract, there is some truth to that.
There is some truth to that. I mean, it mostly applies to batteries. However, because I don't recommend to people, especially when I do dating coaching, I don't recommend that they specifically seek out someone who is completely different than them.
Yeah.
I think there has to be a basis of similarities. There has to be certain, they have to have similar visions and a similar philosophy in life and going in the same direction. Those things have to be there. But yeah.
So I think that opposites attract means energies attract.
Yes.
So when you seek a partner, values need to be the same.
Yes.
And your vision of life, what do you want to create? What do you aspire towards?
Yes.
What kind of house you want to build? But energies need to be different.
Yeah, there has to be, like, the vision and the values have to be there. And I have to want to support who you want to be. You have to support who I want to be, right? We have to have those things in common. But generally, in a partnership, I'm going to be seeking a person who has what I don't have. And you're going to be seeking a person who has what you don't have.
Yeah.
That's how you could create wholeness. So when it comes to masculine and feminine energy, Judaism believes that the male mentality, the male mindset, the male energy is one of giving, one of providing, and the female energy is one of receiving, right? The female psyche is a hunger for life, always looking for something more that is missing. And the male mentality is a desire to provide what is missing.
That's exactly why, that's amazing, because that's exactly why we refer to God as masculine, isn't it? Because God is, we always refer to him to masculine because he's giving, he's always giving. And the people of Israel or humanity, we talk define it as feminine in Hebrew,
Yes.
because it's receiving. So it's probably that same point that the people of Israel or humanity in general is always seeking more, seeking how to connect to God, seeking to receive from God, and God always gives because it's part of the nature.
Yeah. God is the giver, God is the ultimate provider. So we do refer to God in terms of masculinity, but when God's presence resides with us, we call it the Shekhinah,
which is feminine.
Feminine as well, right? But it's interesting to note that we don't believe, like, when it comes to a human being, a human male alone is incomplete, a human female alone is incomplete. They only become a complete being when they unite with each other. That's the attraction between male and female. It's an attraction of connection that they're looking for. It's so much deeper, it's so much more than just something, external or physical.
Absolutely.
It's much deeper than that.
And I think it's an issue as a young man, I can tell you, single young man, what I see in society is a culture that's constantly teaching men not to be masculine, like the traditional masculine roles of being. I mean, call me old-fashioned, but I still believe in chivalry. I still believe that men should be able to provide, to protect. They have an innate energy and a calling to provide and to protect and to be mission driven, to be a leader, to working towards a goal, overcoming adversity.
Yeah.
And we're teaching men nowadays in a society to be more feminine, in the sense that you have to reconnect to your feelings, and you don't have to overcome adversity. And the entire idea, I spoke yesterday about this, that the entire idea of a man is that yes, you can have fear, you can be scared, but still you're going to stand up and you're going to overcome the adversity. So that's the story of the superhero, the comeback story, the story of overcoming. That's super inspiring for men, for the men figure. And I feel that society, the savior, the leader, exactly. And I think as a society, we're trying to make men be less of that. And there's all this talk about toxic masculinity, and we're teaching women to be more masculine, which is, they have to go out and work. And I'm not necessarily saying that that's a bad thing. It's good, but a lot of times they lose the beautiful aspect of the femininity, which is the nurturing aspect. What do you think about that? Do you see that that's a problem nowadays?
I see that this attitude is actually destroying our society. It's destroying healthy relationships. This is feminism gone wrong. It's feminism that has turned into the elimination of masculinity and the elimination of femininity. So we no longer have true masculinity in the world. We no longer have true femininity in the world. So we don't have the entire premise of humanity is now missing. Men who are being forced to be more feminine and women who are feeling the pressure to be more masculine. It's ridiculous. We have to stay in our lane. Yeah. Right? We need strong masculinity. We need strong femininity. Neither one is better than the other. They all have their own role to play. They each have their own role to play. And we have to lean in to the masculinity, and we have to lean into the femininity in the ways that apply to us. And we have to, and that's our mission in this world, to use the strengths that we were given to become our best selves, to be the best versions of ourselves, through using all the parts of ourselves. So this whole eradication of masculinity for men and femininity for women, it's completely destructive. Men aren't happy, women aren't happy.
Yeah.
So what's the point?
And absolutely, and we're destroying, I think, the roles for men to play. As a man, I can tell you, like, it used to be in the past that you strive. Who are our role models? I mean, I look at my grandparents and my parents, that they overcame adversity. They had to escape the Holocaust, and they still came and worked and provided for their families. I mean, that's an amazing role. But when we take that role away from men, you're leaving them with nothing. So they don't have anything to pursue, and that's when depression comes in. And I think this role, when you have roles in society, traditional roles that you need to play, people are trying to eliminate all roles as saying that roles are bad, and what's good is to reconnect to your true self. Look inside and reconnect to who you are in the inside, and to aspire to be a certain way or a role is just society imposing on you, top down, a certain way of life. But I think having these roles are something positive, because having these roles, I mean, it has provided happiness for thousands and millions of people throughout history.
Look, a man, as we explained previously, a man, his nature is to be a provider. So there has to be a receiver in order for there to be a giver, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean a giver is more superior and a receiver is more inferior. Absolutely not. That's how they become equal partners, by each one using the strengths that they were given and the innate personalities that they were given. A man by nature is a provider. If he doesn't have someone that he can provide for, then he feels completely stifled. He's shut down. It's very hard for him to function at his fullest because he's not being that provider. If a woman is not provided for, and we're not just talking about financially, we're talking about emotionally, we're talking about her safety, we're talking about a woman being protected, right? And if she is not, and by the way, this doesn't mean that a woman doesn't know how to protect herself. And this doesn't mean that a man, is not a receiver at certain points in life. Of course he is. We all give and receive equally in a relationship, but we give and receive in a way that we're supposed to be giving and receiving, and not flip it around in the reverse, which is what our society is doing today, right? Because that doesn't work. It doesn't work. It becomes complete chaos. If there's no structure, if there are no roles, as you said, we live in chaos, which we're kind of living in today, a world of chaos. So this is not an implication that a woman is not able to provide for herself and to keep herself. Of course she is. But why would she, if she can make a deep connection and have this real emotional intimacy with another person, when she allows herself to be provided for and she receives that, and she allows herself to give to him in the way that a feminine energy gives to a masculine energy, and he receives that from her, and it's just this beautiful dance of completion and oneness between them, and then they're able to reach the deepest levels of emotional intimacy with each other. There's nothing that's more pleasurable and beautiful than that.
That's beautiful. And I want to ask you, because I do think that the masculine essence is related a little bit to conquest and the pursuit of status in general. Okay. So if you see, like, historically, you've had all these Napoleon, Genghis Khan, all these, I mean, I'm not saying that these people are role models, but you see that they went to foreign lands only because they had this desire to conquer, to be aggressive, to be aggressive. Yeah, we can say that they maybe didn't channel it properly by going and conquering foreign lands, but you have that innate desire as a man. And I'm asking you this because I think that the problem with status in general is that, in essence, what you're doing is you're comparing yourself to other people. When you talk about status, is like, do I have more than this other person? And but on the other hand, having that desire is something that pushes you forward, that you're striving for more, you're striving to grow. So I recently thought to myself that the best way to pursue status, so to say, is to create this figure of yourself, to compare yourself with yourself and not compare yourself with others. So create this like figure that you're battling constantly and saying, like, the ideal me would wake up, go to the gym, go to the synagogue, be a provider, be a protector, be successful doing this, and comparing yourself to your true potential. So when you're comparing yourself to your true potential, that's another way of pushing yourself and growing, and not comparing constantly yourself with others. So that's something that I think many men, we have the trouble, and it's important for us to channel that energy properly, because if not, we can fall into arrogance. And that's why you have many men nowadays that are strong, confident, that they seem arrogant, and they lack true depth in life and true spirituality.
I absolutely agree with that. The only person we should be comparing ourselves to is the person we were yesterday, right? Everyone else is really irrelevant in our pursuit of life. You were born alone and you die alone, right? And it has everything to do with you. Now, in the process, in the interim of that birth and death cycle, you're creating connections with other people, right? But those connections are only there so that you can become your best self through your interactions with other people. And so you can help other people become their best self. We're there as interdependent beings, so we can help each other and be there for one another. And at the end of the day, I'm supposed to be, becoming the best version of me. right? So it has nothing to do with anyone else. And every single other person is completely irrelevant when it comes to my own personal growth. So that's number one. You're right. That status has to be your own personal status. It's between me and myself and probably God, right? Just between us, right? However, I do want to ask you a question based on what you just said, all right? Do you think that there is no place for us to care about our public image in the eyes of other people?
I do think that we should care. Okay. Because I think there's a misconception. A lot of people say, I do things for myself, but I mean, if no other human existed, you probably wouldn't dress up the way that you dress up. You wouldn't take care of yourself the way that you do. You wouldn't care because the people aren't there. So I do think that there's a place for you. The question is to what extent? To what extent?
You know, can I quote a Mishnah? I'm going to quote a part of the Torah, okay? Where it says, I'm going to say the Hebrew, then I'll explain it, okay? V'yitem nikiyim Hashem u'mei Yisrael. And these words mean that you should be nikiyim, it means clean and pure. You should be clean, you should be pure in the eyes of God, and it says in the eyes of your fellow Jews. Right? There is something to be said about what we call in Hebrew having a Shem Tov, a good reputation, a good name. And I think there's a few reasons for that. I think number one is because we represent God in this world. We have to make sure that we're doing the right thing and that we're doing things that are appropriate and that we are living up to our standards and our value system, and we're pursuing our greatest selves, right? We have to. We represent God, right? On the same note, caring about your reputation and your public image is important as well, because it kind of serves as a barometer to see where you're really holding. If somebody else sees you and says, oh, maybe you shouldn't be doing this, you should be, that's a moment for self-reflection.
It's a great point.
Right? It's a point of self-reflection. 1 minute, maybe they're right. Maybe this is beneath me. Maybe there's something else it can be. Maybe I should be speaking another way, doing something. So it's very important to be able to have this self-image that we take care of and that we...
But it's tricky because if we have like a society, a wicked society, for example, especially now in social media, that you say something and you get absolutely canceled. Sometimes you didn't say anything. I mean, sometimes a conversation saying that men and women are different may be canceled. So maybe if you self-reflect and you said, wow, maybe I said something wrong, but how do you balance that? How do you balance being true to your belief systems and at the same time being, having the ability to handle criticism and self-reflection? I think there's no answer to that. I think it's a tough answer, right?
It's a tough answer, but I think I have an answer.
Yeah? You have an answer to everything.
It's going to cover everything, but this is going to bring me back to that Mishnah, that verse that I quoted. Okay, let's pay attention to the words, to the order of the words, right? V'yitem nikiyim, you have to be clean and pure in the eyes of, right, before Hashem and before the people.
So first God and first, yeah.
As long as we put God first, as long as we can answer the question, is what I am about to do, is what I am about to say going to bring glory to God's name? Is it going to make me closer to God, or is it going to make me further away from God? Then I know I'm doing the right thing. Regardless of what other people have to say, I know that I'm doing the right thing because I'm doing it for the right reasons. God comes before the other people, right? And I think that the key, this is the most important thing, I think the key to this is a Shem Tov, a good reputation, is not something that we actively pursue. It's something that we acquire just by the way we live our life. Just by doing the right thing, making good choices with the right intentions, altruistically, just because we want to do the right thing, we automatically, organically acquire a good reputation. But if you're pursuing a good reputation, then it's completely inauthentic. Yeah. And all we're doing is chasing honor, which is ego, and it defeats the whole purpose, right? So it's about understanding that I'm living my life in a way where I am choosing my values, where I know that this is what God wants me to do. I'm making good decisions. And then what other people say is irrelevant, right? And chances are that when you are a person who lives your life in the right way, and people see that and people know that, and you're not going to be canceled.
Yeah.
Right? And truthfully, even if you are, as long as God doesn't cancel you, that's
good.
And you're not canceled in his eyes, right? So we're good.
And I think that leads to a broader discussion of having faith in general in God in everything that all your pursuits. I started reading this book called Shara Bitachon, which talks about, it's a great book, talks about all the benefits. The book starts making the case for the benefits of having trust in God in general and surrendering to the outcome. So I think I'm a person that I try to be in control a lot of the time of many things. And I think, for people that are in general try to achieve a lot in their lives,
yes,
they try to be in control. And as a great CEO or as a great human, you have to learn how to delegate and how to detach yourself from the outcome. I mean, you put everything out there and then you let God do the rest. And I think this is something specifically with shidduchim, with finding the person.
Yeah.
Which because in general, I think in this, it's a great challenge for a lot of us, because in business, let's say the more you do in business, the harder you work. There's not a clear-cut correlation, but if you stay 3, 4, 5, 6 hours working harder and doing more and trying to find more customers, I mean, you're probably going to see a correlation there. The more you work, the more money you're going to have, or there's not clear correlation. Of course, God has plans for everybody, but specifically with shidduchim, with finding the person for you to get married, there's so much that you can do. I mean, you can put yourself out there, you can do everything, but it's not a clear-cut correlation that the more you go out, the more you call people and ask them on dates, the better outcomes you're going to have.
It's not so clear cut.
It's not clear cut. So I think this leads to what the conclusion that I got, this led me to, is that the best thing that you can do to find the person is to build yourself up. Because if you build yourself up, if you become the wisest, the smartest, the fittest, or the healthiest, the most successful in all areas of your life, you're gonna attract the right person in the end of the day. That works better than constantly calling random people and being desperate to see who you're gonna marry. I mean, that's
for sure. When I teach either my dating clients, or if I give classes to people in the dating world, I always tell them, I give them this exercise. I say, I want you to write a list of all the things you're looking for in your potential partner. Okay, all the things that are important to you. And I give them like 15 minutes. They sit, it's quiet, and they write everything that they're looking for in their partner. And then I tell them, now I want you to read the list. I want you to take the list home, and I want you to become all the things that are on that list.
very smart. Great strategy also.
Because
it makes more sense.
This is what we're looking for. This is what I want. But who are you? Do you match the person that you're actually looking for? This is a time we have to become the spouse that we want to attract, right? We have to become that person. So, it's a time for growth. It's time for, and yeah, there's a lot of growth before we find a partner. But let's not forget, there's a lot of growth that you're going to have with your partner too. So we're not becoming perfect people, and we're not looking for perfect people. Mm-hmm. And I have all the time. You met my husband, you know him. I have brides that I teach, or people come to my house, they always tell me, I want to marry someone who's just like your husband. And I say to them, my husband wasn't my husband when I met him. He had potential to be that amazing person he is today, but he wasn't that yet. He became that, right? Yeah. So you look for potential in a person, but if we're already looking for this fully made, perfect being, we're not going to find them.
Totally makes sense. I learned the other day that I think in Jewish philosophy, or according to Judaism in general, I think the Midrash talks about this, that 40 days before a person comes down to the world, there's a heavenly voice that comes out and says, this person is going to marry this other person. Mm-hmm. So it seems like Judaism does believe to a certain extent in a soulmate.
Yeah.
And I will get your thoughts on that, but before that, so there's this voice, and still we see a lot of people that, Chas Shalom, they don't get married, they don't find their couple. So there's apparently a contradiction there, that how can God say before you're born, this person is going to be married to this person, and a lot of people don't get married? And I'm not saying that this is what happens with most people. I mean, every person has their own journey, but there's also another saying in the Midrash that says that Kashe shiducho shel adam kekriyat yam suf, which means that it's very tough to find your soulmate as when God
Split the sea.
split the Red Sea for the
Sea.
Jews, when the Jews crossed the Red Sea. So what's the correlation between shidduch, or finding the person, and the splitting of the Red Sea? So I heard this, that I thought that it really inspired me, and I thought that this exemplifies what we were talking about earlier, that the Red Sea, the only time where the Red Sea split was when Nachshon Aminadav, this person, there was a leader of the tribe of Judah that walked, the sea didn't want to split, and he walked, and up until the water wasn't, up until his neck, that's when the sea split. So there's a midrash that says that when the people of Israel went to the sea didn't want to split. The sea told God, listen, I don't want to split. And God told the sea, it's an allegory of course, but God told the sea, listen, you have to split, because when I created you, I embedded within your DNA that you were going to have to split when the Jews came along. And the sea told God, listen, yeah, I agree with you, but these are not the Jews. I mean, look at them. They're behaving like the Egyptians. They're not behaving in the correct way. They didn't invest time in growth. They're serving other gods. So who are these people? I'm not going to split up for these people. And up until the point that Nachshon Aminadav, this person, this leader from the tribe of Judah, he went and he, with complete faith, he showed what the sea wanted to see. Who were the Jews? People that were working on themselves, that were growing. Once he made that commitment by walking up until the water were up until his neck, that's when the Red Sea opened. So so in the case of shidduchim, it's the same thing. God will give you the soulmate, but first you have to do your part. First you have to grow. First you have to become what Nachshon Aminadav became, grew to that point.
100%. I just gave a class on Pesach, on the second to last day of Pesach, which is the day of the anniversary of the splitting of the sea. So I gave this class that I called Nachshon and Nike. Just do it.
That's a good one.
Is that good, right? Because sometimes you have to just do it. You throw yourself into it. You have to go for something. Sometimes there's this concept that I created that's called skip the thought. Skip the thought is this idea that sometimes we get so stuck in our minds. We have these reverberating thoughts over and over again. We analyze things to death, right? And then we come up with different excuses why we can't do the thing, because we just spent so much time thinking about it. And we thought about all the things that could possibly go wrong, right? And we have all these things that prevent us from growth, prevent us from doing the thing, prevent us from going out with the person, prevent us from committing to a relationship with a person, just prevent us from starting a podcast, writing a book, whatever it is that we're trying to do, right?
Yeah.
Because we're so bogged down by those thoughts that make us crazy. And then we have all these excuses and rationalizations. You know what it means to rationalize?
Of course. I do that often.
Rational, you know what they are? Rationalize are rational lies.
That's
they're
amazing.
Rational lies. We believe them because they're rational. They make sense. Like, oh, you're right, that's a good excuse. That's a good point, So skip the thought means that there are certain times that we know deep down what the right thing to do is. We know deep down what we should be doing. We know deep down who we should be. We know deep down what the right decision is. And we have to just go for it without allowing ourselves to stop and think. Skip the thought.
That's a great...
Thought and do it, right? So that's what we learned from Nachshon. Of course he was scared. Of course, but he developed himself to the point where he was able to just do it and not be afraid to do it. So, and then here's another point based on the question you asked, the idea that you brought down about the finding a shidduch, finding a match, and Hashem splitting the sea, God splitting the sea, right? The question really is why is that a comparison? First of all, what's the correlation between the two? But also, was the sea hard for God to split?
Of course not. God is all powerful.
Right? Wasn't that, what is it really? What's that all about? So there are two different things that I just want to explain to you over here because they have a lot to do with what you were just saying. The first thing that we need to understand is, do you know that when the sea split, a lot of people have this misconception, this misunderstanding of how it worked logistically. How did the sea split? It was not a linear crossing.
And it was 12...
Well, it was 12 different tunnels that they had to walk through for each tribe, but it wasn't a linear tunnel. It didn't go from one end to the other, right? It was actually concentric semicircles. Do you know that they left, they entered the sea and left the sea on the same side of the sea?
Oh, wow.
They didn't go from one side to the other. right? This, if you look at the map of where
That
they were
makes
going,
sense.
where they had to go, it's straight up, right? But they had to go that way. Long story that we can't get into why they had to skip this area, whatever it is, right? But they ended up in the same part, just much higher up. Now, when you have linear lines that you have to cross, so they're all the same. They're all completely equal in length, right? Just go 1, 2, 3 till 12. When they are semicircles, how does that work? It means that the furthermost one is going to be much longer than the innermost one, right? So what does it mean that it was like finding your match is like the splitting of the sea? For some people, they're going to be on the innermost path, and it's going to be smooth, quick, easy. They're going to find their partner. For some people, it's going to take longer. And for other people, it's going to take even longer. It's not going to be as smooth. It won't be as quick. It won't be as easy. But you're going to come out. You're going to find your partner. You're going to come out in a place that is higher up. You come out in a place where you have worked on yourself, where you've improved yourself, where you're now ready to find that match. So everybody has their own journey when it comes to finding their match, because we're all in a different tunnel crossing the sea. Now, another thing that's important to understand is, so that's just encouraging for people to understand. But another thing is, and here's where the work comes in, all right? Splitting the sea went completely against the nature of the sea. But the sea is not meant to be split. It just doesn't work that way, right? So it went against its nature. And the idea of that is, why is this connected to finding your partner? Because when you find that partner, and when you enter into a union with that partner, and you get married, and you're committed to a relationship with that person, you're going to have to go against your nature many times. This is all about working on your character traits. It's all about becoming a better version of yourself, the best version of yourself. It's about using restraint. It's about deciding, and discerning how to respond, what to say, what not to say, when do I hold my tongue, when do I speak. It requires going against your nature if you want to have a really beautiful and emotionally intimate marriage with another person, right? Now, eventually you learn this depth and it becomes part of you. Whatever part of our nature we have to kind of break and go against, it becomes part of us after a while. And many times, I'm sure there are things you've worked on in your life that you don't give second thought to now, right? It just becomes a part of you. Yeah. So it's not like it's this major work for the rest of your life. Of course not. It's always work, because everything we do, you buy a house, right? You don't just buy it and then you leave it. You're constantly maintaining it in order for it to stay solid and beautiful and healthy, right? You have to always maintain your home. So a relationship always has to be maintained. But it doesn't require a tremendous amount of work the way it does in the beginning when you're first learning each other and when you realize, how to navigate through everything, right? So I just had to throw that in. I don't want to scare people off and think, it's so much. It's not so much work. It becomes second nature to you. But of course it's work. Everything good in life is work, right? Nothing good comes easy.
And that's where most of the fulfillment comes from, ironically. If you, the more you work in something, once you get the outcome, that's where fulfillment comes from. And I think I'm not married, I don't have any kids, but from what I hear, I think the family and what you create, that's what provides the most fulfillment in 100%. Your life. And 100%. Going back to the discussion that we had earlier about society making a woman more feminine and woman more masculine and men more feminine, I think something horrible that's going on is this idea that we're telling women that they should dedicate themselves completely to their careers and leave aside their families. So you have these cases of women. What can you accomplish if you don't have kids? What's the most amazing thing that can happen? Okay, you're 50 and you can afford an extra Gucci bag. Okay, good for you. But if you dedicate your life to having kids, that's where the most fulfillment comes from, I think.
You know what's ironic? The fact that as human beings, what do we pursue the most in life? We pursue happiness, we pursue pleasure. That's what everybody wants, right? If you ask anyone, what do you want to be when you grow up? I just want to be happy. I just want to be happy. It doesn't matter what path I take to that happiness, as long as I'm happy. You ask anyone, what do you want your kids to be? I just want them to be happy. Like, it's this obsession with pursuing happiness, right? So, and pleasure. We're human beings, and we're always, every choice we make, right? We have this need for pleasure, and every choice we make is a choice that is bringing us closer to the pleasure that we're seeking. So being people who are constantly pursuing happiness and constantly pursuing pleasure, right? We live in a society that is extremely unhappy. We live in a society that is extremely depressed and extremely sad and extremely not content in their life. And people who are, living in lack, living in void, but we spend our whole lives pursuing happiness and pleasure, right? So I think
that's ironic, yeah.
It's very ironic. So I think that a big issue over here is that, and I don't understand how our society has not picked up on this yet, because some of the smartest people and the world, the therapeutic world, and people who there's a lot of wisdom there, have not picked up on the fact that because I'll tell you what they didn't pick up on yet. They're teaching, our society is teaching us that in order to be a happy person, you have to do what makes you happy. You have to spend your life chasing and pursuing whatever it is that makes you happy. That means only do things that make you happy. If it doesn't make you happy, don't do it. If you don't feel like doing it, don't do it. If you're not in the mood to do it, don't do it. Only do the things that make you happy. When really, it's exactly the opposite. And this is what I meant, that they didn't pick up on the fact that doing for yourself, when you are the center of your world, it could never make you happy, because happiness comes from having a deep purpose and meaning in life, a deep sense of purpose in life, right? And that only comes from making another person happy, giving to another person. We're in this world to give to the world, not to take from the world.
Yeah.
And as I said before, there are receivers and there are givers, but there's a difference between being a receiver and being a taker, right? What do you think the difference is? What would you define a taker as?
I mean, I think a taker has complete disregard for the giver, so for the part of the giver, but the receiver appreciates, gives back appreciation, and that's how you generate this connection. Mm-hmm. Once you appreciate that the other person is giving to you, the other person feels appreciated as well. You're fulfilling a role. The taker doesn't care who's on the other side.
A taker is someone who is just there to absorb and to milk you and to
So I was right.
Yeah, you're right.
Oh, okay, good.
100%. A taker can never be satisfied. You can never fill up a taker's tank. Okay, no matter how much you give to a taker, they're always going to want more. They're always going to need more. They're always going to feel entitled to more. A taker can be a victim of life. A taker is someone, a martyr, which ironically, a martyr comes from thinking you're a giver, but you're giving so much, but you're only giving because you want to take. When you become a martyr, it's because you don't feel like you're being compensated for what you're giving, or appreciated for what you're giving, or valued for what you're giving. But a true giver doesn't need to feel that value. A true giver will feel so content because they're making another person happy, and they're seeing how much good they're providing for another person. Right?
Yeah.
And that makes you feel good about yourself. And in Judaism, we believe, I know people say, oh, are you actually giving if you're feeling good about giving? You have to give without feeling good. No, we don't believe in being a martyr. That's not what we're all about. Of course you can reap the benefits of your giving and feel good about yourself for doing something good, right? But so when we live in this world where it's just about me and my needs and my feelings and my happiness, it becomes a world where we're so self-absorbed. It becomes this world of self-obsession, which is what it has become, right? And we can't possibly be happy because we don't feel fulfilled when we're only giving to ourselves, because we're just taking from the world instead of giving to the world.
Totally. And I think I've never understood this idea. I've always challenged this idea of the most important thing is for you to be happy. I completely disagree with that, because that means that you can be a completely immoral person, but as long as you're happy, that's the most important thing.
That's right.
And ironically, what you're telling people when you say the most important thing is to be happy and do what makes you feel happy, what you're essentially saying is that whatever doesn't make you happy in the moment, then just don't do it.
Right.
So discipline. What about discipline? I mean, discipline is the entire idea of discipline is you do things that make you unhappy right now.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe in the future that will make you happy, but in the moment that won't make you happy. So that's where discipline comes along. And
well, this is the whole conflict between instant gratification versus long-term pleasure.
Yeah.
long-term happiness, where we chase after the instant gratification. This makes me feel good right now. You could be making the biggest mistake of your life, right? The next day, whatever it is that you did, you wake up and you say, I can't believe I just did that. And you feel terrible about yourself. You end up living in shame and in guilt, and then that creates a cycle, a vicious cycle of making more bad choices. Because when you make a poor choice, you don't feel good about yourself. You feel guilty, you feel shameful. So you're not in a space where you feel confident and pride in yourself. So you make another poor choice, and it's a vicious cycle downward. But if you're able to stop for a minute and say, I know this feels good right now, but it's not the right thing for me, right? I know that I can make a better choice. And when you make that better choice, you're going to get long-term gratification instead of instant gratification because you feel so good about yourself. How good do you feel when you exercise self-discipline? There's nothing like it, right? You feel, wow, that was incredible. It's so empowering when you do that, right? And then it's a virtuous cycle upward instead of a vicious cycle downward because you feel confident in yourself because you made a good decision. That pushes you to make the next good decision and the next good decision.
Get momentum.
Momentum. It builds your dignity. You feel good about yourself, right? Discipline is everything. Discipline is the greatest gift that we have. This is why we have 613 mitzvot. What is a mitzvah? A mitzvah is there to teach us that there are boundaries. Sometimes you have to say no. And sometimes you have to say yes, even though you feel like saying no, right? This is what is required of you now. Mitzvot are there to teach us discipline, self-discipline, because only through self-discipline do we build our self-confidence and we create meaning and purpose in life, which is the ultimate happiness that we're seeking. So you're right, happiness is not the goal. It can't be the goal. I mean, it's a moving target, happiness, because it's a rat race. I'll be happy when this and this. I'll be happy when is that going to happen? Right? There's always another thing I'm waiting for. So if happiness is the target, it's a moving target. And what are the odds of hitting a moving target? Right?
Impossible.
Because it's always impossible. There's always something else that's going to make me happy. Right now, I can't be happy because I'm waiting for that to happen. When that happens, I'll be happy. Why are you going to be happy when that happens if you can't be happy now? When that happens, you're going to wait for the next thing in life, the next occasion, the next event, the next person to make you happy, the next thing. It doesn't work that way. Nobody makes us happy, and nothing makes us happy.
I heard a great analogy, which is, let's say there's a piano. A child sees a piano, and the first thing he does is he goes and he plays every single key on the piano. He plays as many, and he thinks that the more you play, the more keys you play in the least amount of time, the more fun you'll have, and the better of an experience you'll have. That's a child, somebody that doesn't understand. But an adult, somebody that's mature, understands that just by pressing certain keys in certain moments, in a certain sequence, that's how you create a beautiful song.
Yeah.
And that song is the song of life, in essence. So it's the same thing in life. I mean, if you exercise self-discipline and if you press on certain keys in certain times and you have these boundaries, that's how you're gonna live a fulfilled life. If you behave like a child, which means doing whatever you want whenever you feel like it, you're gonna end up having a chaotic life. You're not gonna be happy.
100%. We can understand that on so many levels. You know, you have a huge bag of chocolate, right? If you sit down and eat all the chocolate at once, you're going to hate chocolate for the rest of your life. But if you let yourself have a little bit every day, right, you get so much pleasure from it, right? You have boundaries, and that's how you enjoy things more.
You have this in the context of marriage as well, right?
Yes, 100%.
Between,
In Judaism, right, we have the family purity, right? That's exactly what it is. We have this separation between married couples just for the sake of the union again, right? And that's how it keeps a marriage refreshed and alive, because you have a separation. Because if there's too much every day, no matter how much you love sushi, you eat it every day, you're gonna get sick of it, right? Yeah. So there has to be a certain level of discipline within it, a certain restraint. Restraint is what leads us to to higher levels, learning self-control. There's nothing like self-discipline, self-control. It's literally the greatest gift. It's what builds us up. It's what helps us reach the greatest levels of pleasure that exists in the world. I think another reason why we live in a world that is so depressed, even though we pursue pleasure, is because we don't know how to tap into the pleasure. Right? I think the majority of the world thinks pleasure means physical pleasure. It means something that I derive pleasure from any of the five senses. Right? Tasting something, feeling something, seeing something, hearing something that gives us pleasure, smelling, whatever, right? all of these things, we think that's the ultimate pleasure. That is the lowest form of pleasure that exists in this world. And yes, it's a great pleasure, anything that's physical, but it's the lowest level of pleasure. There's emotional pleasures, there's intellectual pleasures, there's spiritual pleasures, and spiritual pleasures are the highest pleasure that we can reach, right? There's love. What an amazing pleasure is love. That's a way greater pleasure than any kind of physical pleasure, any sort of love, right?
Yeah.
And it goes more and more, finding meaning in life, being a person who lives for a purpose. That is one of the greatest pleasures that exist, right? So that you go higher and higher up. And then you get to this place where there's this spiritual pleasure of creating a relationship with God, which is the ultimate pleasure, right? But in order to do that, so reaching the greatest levels of pleasure requires self-discipline, requires us to set aside a smaller pleasure for a greater pleasure, right? In the world of economics.
Yeah.
The world of economics,
Yeah,
right?
a
That's
little
what you
bit.
do, right?
Yeah.
You're a businessman, right? So I'm an expert in spending money. That's where I start in economics. But I do know the law that you only exchange a lesser good for a greater good. You never exchange a greater good for a lesser good.
Yeah.
So whatever you're spending your money on, you're making a decision that that thing is more important than the money it's worth, than the money you're spending on it, right? Your time, whatever, I decided to sit here with you for this hour and have a conversation because I decided this was a greater good than whatever else I could have been doing in this hour of my time. It's an exchange that we make. We have to be willing to exchange a lower level of pleasure in this world for a higher level of pleasure. But if you don't know that higher levels of pleasure exist, then you spend your whole life just on the lower levels of pleasure.
Which is a waste, yeah.
And it's a big waste. And that's why people can't feel fully fulfilled, because you don't feel fulfilled just on physical pleasure, because we're so much more than just bodies. We have a soul, we have an intellect, we're so much deeper than that. So we only feel fulfilled when we reach the greatest levels of pleasure that exist, and it goes way beyond the physical. So we have to learn how to tap into the deepest levels of pleasure.
Before we leave, I want to ask you, what advice would you give to young single people that are looking for, to find a couple? What's like the best piece of advice that you would give to them in general? I just put you on the spot there,
but
but
it's okay. I want to think, because I want to really give the right answer. There's so many things that are coming to my head right now.
Yeah.
So many things, like when you're dating, that's not all you're doing. It's not all about like stalling life to date.
Of course.
Which is what a lot of people do. It's like, right now I'm dating, right now I'm just getting married, right now, and then first of all, it's super, super heartbreaking every time something doesn't work out, because your whole mission is to get married and you're not getting married. It's like, what else am I here for, right? But also, you're not able to be present in your life when you're just thinking about the future, right? So very important to stay in the present. So this is one thing, that comes to mind.
That's actually a great piece of advice there. Like, continue growing, continue pushing, continue being yourself. Continue living. Yeah.
Don't stop living just because you didn't find your partner yet. It's not your time. You might be in one of the further circles, one of the outer circles of crossing the sea, right? So just because you didn't find your partner, that's not the goal. That's what we need to understand. A lot of people think marriage is the end. That's the goal of life, getting married. It's not, right? The goal of life is becoming the best version of yourself that you could possibly be. Marriage is one means to that end. And that means if a person never gets married, it doesn't mean that they can't fulfill their mission in this world and be truly happy and content in this world. They can be. Because as long as they are living a life of purpose and meaning, and as long as they are becoming the best version of themselves, they can feel very fulfilled, right? Marriage is a gift, and it's just one way to bring us to the ultimate goal of life, but it's not the end. So what happens once you get married? That's it? Growth is over? Life is over? There's nothing more to live for? Of course not. So you have to continue living life. You have to live in the present. We can't just be focused on the future and what I want to happen, what's gonna be. And that's why it's important to work on yourself as much as you can before you get married, because when people tell me, when they come to me and they're feeling distressed, when they're dating, and they say, I'm feeling lonely and sad and depressed, and I'm single, and I just want to get married so that I won't feel those things anymore. I tell them, what's going to happen when you get married? You're going to be lonely and sad and depressed and married. Marriage is not going to change the way you're feeling now. There's no such thing as a happy couple. What I mean?
What do you mean by that?
I'll tell you what I mean. There's no such thing as a happy couple. The only thing that you have are two happy individuals who can then become a happy couple. You cannot just become a happy couple if you're not a happy individual.
Yeah.
You have to work on your own happiness. There is no one in the world who can make you happy. And it's not even a fair expectation to put on another person that you're responsible for my happiness. Like, that's not fair. And it's not even a realistic expectation. You can't control my happiness. You can give and give and give and give to a person and try to make them happy as you can possibly make them. And they're still not going to be happy because they don't know how to be a happy person by themselves, right? So there's no one who can make you happy. It can only make you happier, right?
Yeah.
And the same thing goes with love. If you don't feel lovable and if you don't feel loved, there is no one who can make you feel loved. The person, your partner can love on you and love and love and love and love, and you're still going to feel unloved if you don't know how to love yourself. So this, I think, is a very, very important message that I want everyone to understand. You have to learn how to love yourself, how to feel lovable, and walk around with that self-love. And you have to know how to make yourself happy exactly where you are right now, with the circumstances that you have right now, wherever you are in life. You have to be happy. And then when you meet that person, and chances are, by the way, you're going to end up meeting that person if you feel happy and loved from within.
Yeah.
You attract that person to you because people are attracted to that, right? When you do meet that person, then the whole idea is for you to be able to expand yourself and to include the other person in your happiness and in your love, right? But we can't depend on the other person for us to feel happy or to feel loved. That has to come from within.
Great message. And I learned something the other day, and I got to this conclusion that I think that one of the best skills you can have in life is being able to deal with uncertainty all the time. Whether in your business or who am I going to marry? Is the customer going to show up? Am I going to achieve this? If you manage to deal with the uncertainty and leaders are those that bring certainty to an uncertain situation.
Yes.
I mean, if you think about it. And I heard another quote, which is that the juice of life, one of my favorite quotes that I heard, the juice of life comes from the realm of the uncertain. So think about it, like if you start a business, you don't know what's going on, or if you watch a movie that you've never watched before, you'll probably enjoy it more than if you've watched it. I mean, how many times we hear like, I wish I hadn't watched that show, so I could have enjoyed it more if I saw it again.
Right.
So every endeavor that you have, which is coming from the uncertain, it's an adventure.
Yeah.
That's where the juice of life comes. But too much of an adventure, too much of uncertainty, some people cannot handle it. But I think that's one of the great skills, and it applies also for relationships. And talking to a person the other day, then he told me, what do you think that, okay, now you have, like in my case, or people that are single, like people have uncertainty. Oh, who am I going to marry? What happens if I don't meet that person? If the person doesn't show up, what happens? Like all these doubts, like everybody has. But what do you think, that the minute that you get married, uncertainty suddenly disappears?
Right.
I mean, that's when the most uncertainty starts. Oh, how am I going to provide for my kids? Oh, my husband, is over here, it's over there. Like, what happens if I don't see him? There's so many. What if he leaves me? Then you have other uncertainties coming. So you're always going to live a life of uncertainties, and how you handle uncertainties in the way that you show up every day to handle these uncertainties, I think it's one of the best ways of approaching life in general.
I agree. I think, it's interesting. As children love uncertainty. Children love surprises, right? There's an element of surprise. You surprise a child with something and they glow. At a certain point, and I don't know where this happened and why this happens, but at a certain point, we kind of become jaded as adults, and we no longer want surprises. Ask most adults if they want a surprise party. They'll be like, no, tell me what's happening, right? Children thrive on it. There's a certain element to youth that just thrives on uncertainty. Now, again, as you said, of course, there has to be a boundary, not too much uncertainty. Their kids need a certain amount of predictability in their life, absolutely, and structure. But like this element of uncertainty and surprise can bring them to this next level of joy, right? And as adults, we need to tap into that youthful part of ourselves a little bit sometimes and realize there is, and this, I think, like part of what causes so much anxiety in adults is the fact that there's so much uncertainty and we don't know how to deal with it, because this goes back to what you said in the very beginning. We like to be in control. We like to be in control of things, but life insists on taking the reins and not allowing us to control it, right? If we didn't learn this from the pandemic, then what did we learn, right? We don't have control over almost anything in life. Almost anything. We have no control over what other people are going to say to us, to our children. We wish we could protect our children from anything negative, and we can't. Life is going to get in the way, right? We wish we could protect ourselves from things. We have no control over what life is going to bring, what people are going to do to us or say to us or about us. We have no control. The only thing we do have control over is ourselves, our choices, our attitude, our mindset, our behaviors, our reactions, our responses. It's the only thing. So we have to take control of ourselves. This is true leadership. You mentioned about being a leader. Being a leader means I am in control of myself. I master my emotions, right? We think sometimes this is a little bit of an issue we have with today, going back to what we said before. We lean into our feelings. Today's generation has much more of a relationship with their feelings than we had in the past, which in a way is good. It's excellent. We have much more awareness. We have to be careful with how far we lean into the feelings. Am I allowing my feelings to control me, or am I controlling them? We control our thoughts, we control our feelings, we control everything. And when we can take the reins of our lives back, and when we get our power back and we say, I am in control, I'm not going to let another person's mood control me. Right? I'm not going to let, another person who's provoking me actually determine what it's going to do to me and what my response is going to be. I'm in control. That's true leadership, right? When we master our lives.
That's great. And I know you're pretty busy. I appreciate you taking the time and coming and talking to me. So with that, we end today. And thanks everyone again for joining.
Thank you. For watching.
Subscribe, guys, and I'll put everything in the link so you can also follow Mrs. Yaffa. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.